Thank you very, very much. This is indeed very, very humbling, and I really appreciate all of the wonderful comments. And again, thank you, Governor. I will just say more about the Governor a little bit later. But this is a wonderful recognition, and I do thank all of you. I also think it's important at a point like this just to thank Neil and Patricia and the staff of Irish America for all that they have done since their beginning in 1985 as the voice of America, voice of Ireland in America. So they deserve a round of applause for everything that they do. Now, as I told the Governor when I was sitting with him, he asked me how long I was going to talk, and I said very, very briefly, because Neil has told me to try to be brief, and I will do that. Just have a couple of comments. You know, I don't know everybody here, and not everybody here knows everybody else. We know some people here, some of us, but we don't know all of us. But we all have many things in common. And if we just think for a second in an opportunity like this, it's important to just sit back and just think for a second about a number of things. And if we reflect on those, we can reflect on the fact that we are, all of us in this room, are all immigrants or the descendants of immigrants. And that experience has molded us. It has made an imprint. We may not always recognize it, but it's there if we think about it hard enough. We can also reflect on all of the circumstances and all of the people that have helped us all along the way to get all of us to where we are today. And we can reflect on our understanding that despite our individual efforts and endeavors, our success is also dependent upon timing and a big dose of good luck. An understanding that should not deflect from our confidence, but should help us to be somewhat humble. And all of us in this room have our own personal stories. We have our own personal journeys that is worth ever so often just reflecting on. And as was mentioned earlier by Neil, my journey began in a small rural area in West Limerick, next to a village called Knockadderry, or in Gaelic, Knockandera, which is the Hill of the Oak. A very rural area where everybody around was a farmer. Small farmers, larger farmers. Of course, back then I thought they were all big farmers. Next to us was a village that had, very, very typical of places like Kildimo and others, it had a church, it had a post office that worked sometimes, and of course it had the pub, which was the center of all activity, especially back then for males. It had a blacksmith right next to the church where the farmers came and shoed the horses with the big anvils and the big open fireplaces. And I remember, while that was the main occupation of the blacksmith, I do remember one incident where a farmer came to the blacksmith to have a tooth pulled. Watching that experience terrified me of dentists for the next 2 decades. So we grew up, and I grew up, as many people here, I grew up milking cows and working in the fields, observing us in our house with the big open fire and the bellows at the side, observing my mother washing all of the clothes in cold water in a washboard, Many of you may remember what that looked like. I'm sure there are many people here who have never seen this. In our house, there wasn't any running water or no electricity or no heat. You had to go up the hill in the mornings to a well to get water, and then light a fire, then wait for the fire to boil the water if you wanted hot water to wash yourself. Not that different than many people, including, I'm sure, many people in this room. So, about 20 years ago, I built at home a model of the house that I grew up in. Still at home, it's about this size. I built it as I remember it, because it did fall down on us one night in a storm. And I built all of the furniture that was in that house. The Sugon chairs, the few pieces of furniture that existed, because we all lived basically in 3 little small rooms. And I built that as a reminder, so that every time you walk by it, you remember back to those times, because there are very, very good memories. While there wasn't much around in terms of materialism like we would today consider it, it provided us things that were much, much more important than the material things. Those experiences back then provided us with a commitment to hard work, to family, to the idea of community, to the importance of education, primarily advocated by my mother, who did not have any much of an education herself, but was convinced that education was the way out, which is one of the reasons as a kid that I always had books to read, which is one of my, still to this day, my most enjoyable pastimes. And I have to have the real book. I don't like the Kindle. I have to feel it, touch it, see it, understand it, appreciate it. And it also taught us back then, the culture taught us that we were expected to accomplish something before we were allowed to celebrate or be proud. You had to do something to be rewarded, not just exist to be rewarded. And of course, I was very, very involved in sports. Everybody in the community was involved in sports and physical activity, because everything you did and everywhere you went, you had to walk or bicycle because there were no cars. And sports is absolutely wonderful because it teaches you the benefits of teamwork and collaboration, the value of competition, the understanding that you will win and you will lose, and that when you lose, you can come back and win again. Competitive sports does this. And going back to what Ann said earlier with Kildimo, we did beat Kildimo in hurling. For those of you that never saw the hurling sport, you should witness it at some point. Back when I played, we never wore helmets, which is probably, some people think, the reasons that I have a personality like I have. But despite all of that and those wonderful experiences, circumstances required that I leave, and so I left, and I had a quick sojourn in England working in steel factories in Crawley, south of London. And then I was very, very fortunate, as was mentioned earlier, to come to this wonderful city and this wonderful country. And when I got here, I will never forget how the world completely opened up, where things I would imagine at one point back in that little village now also were very real. New opportunities, new relationships, new knowledge. All of the things that you could possibly dream about, but now all of a sudden they were here to be taken advantage of if you wish to take advantage of them. You know, as Oliver Holmes once said, the mind stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimension. This experience today will all be a little bit different as a result of this experience today. We will walk out of here knowing something more than what we did when we walked in. We have been changed even just by this event today. And now just imagine as a young kid coming into New York with the wonderful opportunity that existed here. And I was fortunate, you know, to work in manual labor and construction and down in the docks, and then end up in academia, not only as a student, but then on faculty, and then work in government, and then work in the insurance industry, and then over the last 18 years in the current organization that I'm privileged to work with. So I have been unbelievably lucky and fortunate. And I have been very lucky and fortunate, and I think everybody here would agree, because I think all of you have experienced this, because I met wonderful people along the way who took a chance on me. I didn't have a strong resume or CV. There wasn't much in my background that demonstrated I could do what people were talking to me about doing. The person who helped me the most during all of those years was the man who introduced me, Governor Cuomo, who threw me into the midst of major policy issues and operational issues of the state when I had no background that I knew what I was doing. And I've always told people the fact that you don't know how to do it doesn't in any way prevent you from being expert at it. Okay? Because you don't know what you're going to do and how you're going to do it until you do it. So just because you didn't have the educational background or you haven't done it before doesn't mean tomorrow you can't be successful at it. And Governor Mario Cuomo gave me that opportunity, and I am eternally grateful. I became a different person after spending 12 years with the governor in Albany. I left that experience thinking that there is very, very little that I can be thrown into in the future that is going to throw me off, because he put me in the middle of almost everything. People take a chance on us. People give us an opening. And I'm always a little bit concerned these days when people say, tell me exactly how you did it before I give you a chance to do it again. I look for the passion, the dedication, the commitment in a person, the positive attitude, irrespective of the CV. I want to know, do they have the drive? Do they have the positive attitude? And we, all of us in this room, have the obligation to give people the chance. So our journeys, and all of us have our own personal journeys and stories, our journeys are not complete. There are many chapters behind us, and there are many chapters ahead of us. And all of us have learned some valuable lessons during our journeys. We should think about those lessons. We should sit back and ask ourselves, what have I learned? And what can I possibly pass on to others? So I have a few suggestions from my brief experience. One is that we do not succeed alone. All of us, everybody in this room, we are the result of the tapestry of influences of all of those people that have touched our lives along the way. A part of each of all of those people reside within us, because we learn something from each one. We just don't do it all alone. Second point is that adversity has its benefits. Adversity is not bad. A tough upbringing is not bad. Struggling as a kid is not bad. It builds character. It builds discipline. It teaches you how to deal with the uncertainty of life. And life is about handling uncertainty. in all its facets, whether it's work-related, family-related, professionally related, or whatever. As George Bernard Shaw once said, you know, life is not about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. Thirdly, as was mentioned and as Governor Cuomo so articulately stated, it's always important never to forget our roots, to sustain our cultures, our traditions, our ethnic identity, our pride. But as we do it, to understand that while we take great pride in our own, we have to have equally respect for those other groups that have pride in their heritages. As Governor mentioned, to build that mosaic. Because that's what the United States is, that wonderful, beautiful mosaic. That, as he stated, doesn't all work perfectly all the time, but works great most of the time. And because we're so fortunate, everybody in this room, because everybody here is very distinguished and everybody here has got to a certain point in their careers, and you're all successful. But because that, we have an obligation and a responsibility. We have an obligation to obviously commit to responsible leadership. We have an obligation to promote civility in public discourse. We have an obligation to battle against the dangers of indifference. We have to continuously promote the ethic of individual responsibility along with the ethic of community. They're not contradictory to one another, because we all, in one way or another, are interdependent. It's that interdependence that creates a sense of community. And we should, more importantly, and most importantly, do for others what others did for us. You know, as Mark Twain so aptly stated, always do the right thing. This will gratify some people and astonish the rest. This has been a privilege. I thank you so much.